All right, now joining us on Tennis Channel Insight, and it's always a pleasure and always a requirement to be joined by a mainstay in the tennis community, Blair Henley, back again on this show. Not a baseball pitcher, but she does everything else. So, Blair, welcome back to the program. Excited to catch up with you.
Hey, Mitch. Yeah, thanks for making mention of my namesake who lives in my same area. Every baseball off season, I'm like, maybe this is the off season where the Blair Henleys will meet in person, and we will for sure have to do the Spider-Man point meme.
Yeah, it's funny how that works and how life just connects dots. And I was saying too, if you're listening to the audio version of this show, I'm talking to 3 Texans this week. It wasn't planned, wasn't something I designed for programming. Also, didn't realize how close you guys live to each other. But Jacob Fernley out of TCU and Mark Knowles, you guys are all in the same community. So this is a Texas-sized episode.
That's right. I love it.
This time of year too, it's a nice time to reflect for all of us in the tennis community. But do you look at your schedule? I guess we can start there. When the U.S. Open finishes up, does that kind of bookend your meet run of what you kind of get up? Because I know it's like nonstop in a lot of ways. It's exciting, but do you kind of look back once the U.S. Opens in the rear view?
Yes and no. It all sort of depends. I feel like this portion of my year is always the least predictable. There are random things that pop up. There could be nothing that pops up, and I kind of never really know until I'm in it. I decided not to do Laver Cup this year. I missed being in Berlin, but the US Open has become such a monster in terms of time away and exhaustion level that I thought it was probably for the best. But I got to do a really cool event for American Express in New York on Arthur Ashe Stadium. They served an amazing family style Italian dinner for card holders. They had special guest Andre Agassi, the whole thing. So I got to return to the scene of the U.S. Open for something much different.
Oh,
I got to shoot something in my house for ATP Media for a docuseries they're doing on the next gen ATP finals players and the hopefuls. So got to do
mm,
that in my living room.
hmm
There are ATP meetings coming to the Dallas Fort Worth area that I get to be involved in. And then at the end of the month, I'm headed to Riyadh for the
Ooh,
WTA finals. So,
yeah.
so hence the reason, or my answer being yes and no, because in some ways it's more relaxed, but on the other hand, there are always things happening. And as we know, tennis never sleeps.
Yeah, I saw some of that, the filming of your house for the next gen stuff. It was pretty exciting. Also kind of shows you how some of the magic is made with staging and whatnot. But I did, you mentioned the US Open, and I had some notes on that too, Blair. That's my first question is how big is this going to plan on getting, especially the week before? Because it is just thralls of people. I know we've talked about tennis having a moment, but for my money and for my, years covering the sport, that week before Fan Fest week, qualifying week, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And it's going to get bigger. That is the one thing I know for sure. I think that everyone saw this year how Mixed Madness went and how Stars of the Open went and even Legends of the Open and Fan Week starting a day earlier this year. And I think there is a hunger for more. I think people want to experience those types of tennis events that they don't get to see once the tournament starts and they don't get to see the rest of the year. And I've said it to you many
Mhm,
times, but I'm a big believer in any way that we can show fans, players, personalities, whether
mhm,
that's
mhm,
hosted practices or these fun events where you can listen to Andre Agassi roast Carlos Alcaraz, or you can watch
mhm,
Ben and Coco play doubles together. Those are the types of things that can help
mhm,
make new fans and also make lifelong fans because because who knows, I don't know, Ben Shelton or name a player took extra
mhm,
time to sign
mhm,
a kid's ball, and that kid from 9 years old on is going to be a diehard Ben Shelton fan. That sort of
mhm.
interaction to me is what creates the fans that tennis needs to sustain itself.
Yeah, I talked to your good friend Nick McCarville right after it kind of concluded before the tournament started. Said much of the same things, echoed a lot of those sentiments. Also leads me into the upfronts. Is that what it's called? The U.S. Open upfronts, the interviews you do on the podium with the players?
Oh, you know what? That's a good name for it because we have the current name
Yeah.
is sort of
You can have that
clumsy.
one for free.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
call it Fan Facing Media Day, which
Okay.
is
Okay.
really a lot of words, but that's sort of what we've called it internally. But that has become one of my favorite moments of the 3 weeks I'm in New York, or favorite events,
Yeah.
where the players get to just come through and have a relaxed 5 to 7 minutes with us. For
Mhm.
fans who are there for
Mhm.
fan week,
Mhm.
they've probably watched a little bit of tennis. They get to see practice happening behind us because this
Mhm.
is all happening as practice is happening on
Yeah.
Ash. It's a really cool 2 for 1 for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love, obviously, not just yours, but I love the post-match interviews, even the post-exhibition match interviews, but it is a different setting. It's something we don't normally see, is the players that aren't having to decompress from a serious or not serious tennis, but kinda just are more chill in that regard.
Yep.
Did you have any funnier stories or any highlights that stuck out from those interviews?
I mean, are you when you say those interviews, are you talking about the newly named upfronts? Or are you talking about
Yes,
post
the
match interviews?
newly named upfronts, yes.
I mean, I think the two that stuck out to me, number one was my height contest with Jasmine Paolini, where she gifted me my first and only win of the US Open,
That was a
where
controversial one. I had a note on that. We're gonna get to the bottom of it. I think I'm on your side. There's the ponytail side of things, and I get that, but the internet is a little divided
the
on that picture.
ponytail does not count. We can officially say, and I don't know that the WTA website agrees with me. I believe the WTA website is generous, much as the ATP site was generous with Diego Schwartzman, listing him at
Mm.
5'7". Uh, so I think I had Jasmine Paolini on that one. And funny enough, I had a sort of a career first with Jasmine Paolini later on in the tournament when Karolina Pliskova retired 3 points in to their match. I'm forgetting which round this was. And
Mhm.
I mean, usually the first set of a match is kind of my safe zone where I can take a breath, mentally decompress. Sometimes, I won't start looking at stats for that match until we work our way into the first set.
Yeah.
Literally 3 points afterward. Thank goodness I didn't leave to go get lunch or something. We see that the trainer has been called to court, and I am
Mm.
furiously pulling up the WTA notes for the day because I'm thinking, surely she's not going to retire, but she might retire. And if she does retire, this could be one of the longer post match interviews I do
Yeah.
during the tournament because you're just sort of filling time at that point. She does, in fact, retire. And we did a post match interview that was longer than the duration of the match itself.
That's a
At this
fun
point, I
fact.
feel like I can write Jasmine Paolini's memoir because
Well,
we talked so much during the U.S. Open. But she is a total delight. I am glad it was Jasmine Paolini, someone who is bubbly, who engages with the crowd, who smiles a lot, who
mhm,
connects well, because she handled that situation as well
mhm.
as one could have.
It's been a immaculate year, I'll use that word, for Jasmine Paolini. She's been glowing, on and off the court. She's top 10 in both singles and doubles now, the Sarah Rani partnership that keeps winning. They'll be playing, she'll be in Saudi Arabia, working hard in both
Yep.
events there. But it's just been remarkable, and it's been good to see good people get rewarded. She has made a lot of new fans, how she handles herself,
Yes.
whether it's saying, "Don't worry about how small you are, you can accomplish things," for fan interaction. Just positivity, I think, more than anything, because she's got the chance through her exceptional play to show the world what kind of person she is. So it's been very cool.
Totally. And it's universal too. Like the ovations that she was getting as she walked out on the court to me was very indicative of how many people know who she is, who a year ago probably didn't. And as
Mhm,
someone who grew up loving Amanda Kutzer because she was diminutive, as the
mhm.
writers like to say, I love that, the short girls out there have somebody to look up to.
Yeah, it's so fun to see what she's accomplished. I had a couple other things written down from your U.S. Open time, and some interviews that stood out to me. Some funny, some are serious side. I love the one with Donald Young and Taylor Townsend. That was a very special moment, and it was good to see. We know how great Taylor's been playing, and her comeback's nothing sort of exceptional. She keeps getting better in both doubles and singles, but it was nice to see Donald Young get his flowers. I'm at a certain age where I remember just how dominant he was at the junior level and how much pressure was put on him. So for them to have that moment, for Taylor to talk about how much Donald meant to her development, was a very fun one, and a very cool thing that I know you got to be a part of and had to appreciate as well.
I just got chills as you were describing it because it was for some of us who started in the tennis industry at a
Mhm,
certain point and who followed tennis for the first time at a certain, in
mhm.
a certain decade. We are so familiar with the rise of Donald Young, and like you said, the pressure that was put on him and the expectations that he had to deal with, and to see sort of that full circle moment on the tennis court with Taylor, such trust between them as tennis players, but also as friends. And Taylor, as usual, was exceptional on the mic, explaining to people how long that relationship has been growing. Just it was special in so many ways, and the fans were so engaged with the story. And I wish they could have gotten one more,
Mhm.
but what a story for the Italians to end up winning it. Yeah, a real
Yeah.
highlight that you don't expect. Those are my favorite types of highlights where you're like, didn't see that coming,
Yeah.
but
No.
there it was.
Didn't also see friend of the program because he's been on here in one of their matches, but Harry just destroy his racket in that doubles match. Just one of the all-time racket breaks I've ever seen. So you
We
get a
love
little
a
bit of
good
everything.
efficient racket break. It's no Stan Wawrinka breaking it over
That's
his knee, but
yeah,
we'll
Stan.
take
I,
it.
I don't know how Stan became the Bo Jackson of racket breaks, but it's really just incredible that he knows how to do that.
I
Strength, I
love it.
guess. I don't know.
Silent, just gets it done.
So one of the other things you did and kind of I would say increased, your profile a little bit at the U.S. Open was breaking the news that Frances Tiafoe run through more shirts than basically like a Macy's sale or something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My other job in another life would have been private investigator, so you can always count on me to sort of be hovering by the bench after or before a post-match interview because you never know what little tidbits you might get. So you better believe I am going to ask Francis, like, how many are you bringing out here for a match? And the answer was 20, and that is a lot of shirts. And a postscript to that whole conversation is during one of his outfit changes, he just left his clothes in the bathroom, which led to a tournament wide kit hunt for this Nike outfit that had been left in the restroom. It
Oh,
would probably have been handed off to multiple people. I don't think anybody ever found it. So
oh.
RIP to those clothes. But yeah, 20 t-shirts. I also another sort of random factoid that I got in that time after the interview when, if something is said, you could
Hmm.
follow up as they're packing
Hmm.
up their bag was the fact that Jessie Pegula has this incredible record over fellow Americans. It was like she had beaten she was like 12-0 this year, something
Ooh,
crazy. She was aware of the stats. So and of course forgetting because it's like the US Open might as well be 10
yeah,
years
yeah.
10 years ago, but she had just beaten an American and she was aware of the stat that she had beaten that many in a row when I asked the question. But then as she's packing up, she said, I also have an incredible record over people represented by GSE. That's her agency. She, she's like, it's like an internal joke at
Um,
GSE that
wow.
Jessie just turns it up a notch when she faces players represented by the same agency.
So yeah, these are the fun stats we want. This is what we want to know is just the little tidbits. Yeah, that PI maybe there's still time. I mean, there's still time for you to do a dual threat
Thank you,
career
thank you,
and
thank
just
you.
investigate. Well, the last thing on the U.S. Open on the tournament itself that I had was it is jarring having known you from a while for a while now. Still that I know that you do it to hear your announcer voice, to hear your PA announcer voice. It's startling because there's times I don't know your shifts, I don't know what happens, and all of a sudden they'll do the interview, they'll go out on the court, and then there's Blair. I think it's Blair because she sounds a little. I'll let you say a little different, and I'll ask you how you kind of came to that cadence and that style of speaking when you're
Yeah,
announcing players on the court.
this is an interesting question, and there was another female announcer this year. Michelle, you did a
Hmm.
few shifts as
Hmm.
well. I think our voices are pretty distinct, so if you thought it was me, it probably was. But I have had to, in the last couple of years, since I was given the chance to do some of that voice of God work on Ash, I have had to figure out how to have a voice that works for the broadcast. So when I say, from the United States, please welcome Coco Gauff. That is not only going to the stadium 20 plus thousand people. That is also going to every TV that has ESPN or Spectrum or whatever, whoever was able to get ESPN during the US Open.
Right.
So it's going out to everyone who's watching, and of course the world feed around the world. And so figuring out a tone, when I am very used to doing announcer work from the court, I'm in general addressing the fans, I'm interacting with the people in the stands, it's for the house, as we say. This is a little bit different. Same thing with the trophy ceremony, for instance, where I am introducing the dignitaries up on the court, the person before the match who's singing the anthem, that sort of thing, is trying to figure out how do you command 20,000 people, but also not sound like you are yelling at the people sitting at home
Yeah.
on their couches. And I've gotten a lot of help. You know, I've asked Andy Taylor, who's been the male voice of Ash since, 20 plus
Yep.
years. And he described it to me as trying to be the voice of the stadium. Like if the stadium were a person, that person is you. And even, you know, when you address the crowd, one of the things that he said to me that was so helpful was, we often say, you know, New York, you know, are you ready? It's time to welcome our players. And he said that he almost asks the question, like, New York instead of New York. There's a difference in the way that he delivers it, which I thought was really helpful to me, just in sort of giving the voice personality versus, again, when we think of announcer voice, we often think of the used car salesman who wants you to buy this 2007 Buick. You know, that's kind of what we tend to think about. So finding a version that is personable and warm, but also authoritative, that's taken some work. I still have a long way to go, but I have been working on it because it is a challenge. It's like a new challenge for me. It's a whole different skill set.
A woman of many talents, because that is a different one from what you talked about earlier on the show. So it is a pleasure to hear that. Moving along with Blair Henley on Tennis Channel Inside In. One thing I got to ask you about, though, you got what we all dream about in this industry, and that's some time with Roger Federer at the Wilson Shoot in New York. So Federer comes out, and I just saw the clips, and I wanted your experience of it. But we know the new racket. We know he's just thriving in this post-playing career. He's got the Uniqlo short shorts on, which threw my mind in a blender as well. But the thoughts on your experience talking to Roger, what he's been up to, this racket project, and also just his post-retirement run going as good as we could have imagined.
Well, first of all, thanks to Wilson for having me for that, because they were like, "Do you think you can make it work?" And I was like, "I think I can make it work." I had.
I'll leave what I'm doing right now.
I was just praying as I got my schedule for my, my day job, that it was going to work out. But it was a really unique event, and I think, Mitch, you know this as somebody who covers tennis during the year. When you are used to being part of the media day car wash, where players come in and you get 3 to 5 minutes, probably closer to 3, or you get 3 questions, and you got to hope that, Novak Djokovic, who gives great answers, doesn't wax poetic for 3 minutes, because that's your time and it is gone. So there's so many variables during media day, and there's that pressure, and you can see the media reps, or the tour reps shooting daggers out your eyeballs. If you go a little bit long, they'll get in your line of sight, and you're like, okay, well, I'm risking my job if I ask one more here. So when that is where you're coming from, having a chance to do an event like this Wilson event at the Wilson store in New York is such a different experience, because the player wants to be there, number one. Not saying they don't love to talk to us on media day, but it's just a different feel. It's not rushed. There was some lottery system for the fans who are able to be there that day, and they're just hanging on every word that he says. And listen, with Roger, and I've had the chance to interview him a few times before, but it has been in that media day setting. But what you hear is accurate. He is a unicorn in the sense that he makes everyone feel special. It's kind of a hard thing to describe. Even when he doesn't feel 100% comfortable, he will make you feel comfortable. And there was a part of that conversation actually where I I thought it was a really honest answer. I asked him what it was like to be back at the US Open after, not playing there since 2019. I had forgotten that that was the last time he actually played at the
Yeah.
US Open. And his response to that was, it was actually kind of uncomfortable at first. There were so many eyeballs, so much attention. He felt like he was taking attention away from the action that was on the court. But he said once he settled in, once people turned their eyes to what was happening on court, he was able to enjoy it as much as he could as a fan. But even if he is not feeling 100% like I'm in my zone, he will always
Yeah.
make you feel comfortable. And that is just something that is so rare.
He's like a living Rolling Stone, like a Beatle. Like he's one of those. I don't know that we'll live long enough to see anyone more popular. Others will come up, but his popularity is unmatched. And to hear those stories about how generous he is with his time, with his energy, it's pretty cool. And I think you interviewed him before. Was that before he went to the match, the Dimitrov night match against Tiafoe?
I didn't get to interview him on site. So it was
Okay.
just the Wilson event.
The Wilson event, I mean. So that was before that match. I was going to
Oh,
say
got
because
it. Yes. Yes, yes,
so
yes.
So unfortunately, the timing didn't line up. So you can ask him, what was it like to actually watch tennis versus what Kevin Hart was doing? Because that side by side was pretty
Unfortunately,
cool.
that
Yeah,
meme had not yet
yeah,
been born,
yeah,
sadly.
yeah. Oh, that's great. But no, it's good to hear Rogers obviously doing well. Another member of that agency he represents, someone doing well and getting to the tennis side thing. But Coco Gauff bounces back after a disappointing end to her U.S. Open. Wins the title, wins the premier event in Beijing, does it with new coach Matt Daly, undefeated in their partnership together, Blair. And I talked about it before the run even happened.
Mhm.
Always been impressed with just the maturity of Coco and her ability to hit the reset button, showing you that a bad day, especially in her case, doesn't define the rest of the month, the rest of the year. She just quietly gets back to work and wins another premier event. Remarkable achievement for yet again another young player.
I completely agree with everything that you just said. She continues to amaze me with how well she rebounds, even when people are so quick to think, okay, well, she's not going to rebound, or she needs to take 6 months off to retool XYZ in her game. But maybe it's because people are saying those things that she's able to rebound so well. We have come to find that she is driven by the haters, as is Naomi Osaka, and maybe others. But these players
Yep.
who are maybe more online than others are more aware of what people are saying. It's fuel for the fire. I personally probably wouldn't want to know. I a
Yeah,
quick
right.
aside on this. I almost never read comments, but when I interviewed Grigor Dimitrov on Ash, it was the day that Alicia Keys and Serena Williams were in the box watching him. And the last question, I couldn't not ask what it was like to have Serena there. And Grigor has talked to me many times about how tight he is
Mhm.
with Serena. So that was a totally
Yeah.
inbounds question. And he, of course, gave a great answer. He interacted with her from the court to the
Right.
box. But people absolutely ripped me for asking that kind of a question. Why would she be asking him about Serena? Why would that make a difference if he's on the court? That's so awkward. They used to date, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I don't know how these players
Mhm.
see that stuff, and some of it you can't avoid, but I do think that some of them are actually very actively seeing what people are
Yeah.
saying about them. I don't know how they do it, but if it can fuel you the way that it seems to fuel some of the players out there, more power to them. And Coco even has that quote on the back of her American Eagle collab jacket, which I think is so cool. She showed me that at the
Ah,
upfronts at the US Open. We got to see the thanks to the haters. I'm going to misquote her, but it was you
yeah.
helped fuel my fire, which is essentially what she said in her trophy speech at the
Yeah.
US Open last year.
Her on the tennis court is just remarkable. It's very tough to beat her. And Karolina Muchova in the final, who has been playing well, just has a problem finishing points against Coco. It is great to see Karolina back playing, back doing well. And I think Sabalenka would say giving her problems. That's 3 straight she's beaten her. There's a real, I know it's not a combat sport, but there's a real styles make fights thing where when Muchova's out there rolling, she's a player that I don't think is the favorite opposition for some of these players.
Yeah, I mean, inject her game into my veins. It's just not something that players see every day. It's unusual, and it's so much fun to watch. I tend to like games where if you were sitting next to someone who had never watched tennis before, they could watch it and think, "Oh, that's impressive." Again, every tennis player at that level is impressive, but some games translate better no matter what your knowledge of tennis is than
Hmm.
others. And Karolina Muchova's game is one of those that you don't have to know a single thing about what you're watching, but you
But
know she's legit fantastic at what she does.
we had some other updates too, going off of just recently, especially on the men's side and the women's side too. But got to give a shout out to someone you know through interviewing him, and part of the glow up. A big win last night for Tomas Machac over Tommy Paul. Second straight week he's beaten him, and Tommy Paul even said, "Go win this tournament. Like you're
Mhm.
playing amazing." That win, that match, but also this guy just continuing to glow up. It's been quite a year for him, quite a summer, especially.
Quite a summer from internet sensation at the Olympics to gold medalist to leader of the short shorts movement. And I'm just going to proclaim him as that.
Revolution. I'm going to
Yeah,
say revolution. Yeah.
much better word. You're just giving me the words today, Mitch. But yeah, he's leader of the short shorts revolution. There's no comparison. I know people like to give Holger Rune a mention. It's going to be Tomas Machac for me. But again, and he also has a really fun game to watch. He's extremely fast. I think his balance is notable when you are moving to the sides as well as he does. You have to have balance on top of that. I think he does that incredibly well. And the Czech men, they're making a name for themselves in the wake of many, 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 many years of Czech women dominating.
I don't know that tennis could have crafted up anything better than the mixed doubles storyline. Like if we came in a lab and say, what can we draw interest, that doesn't get any better than that. But props to him for having the game to back it up too, because that's the other part of this is that we're still talking about it because he's winning matches.
Yes, absolutely. And I am just going to hope that I believe Joma is his sponsor. Like, don't make him shorter shorts because that's what everybody says. Why not just make him shorter shorts? I don't think they could
How
make
does it
short.
go? Like,
The shorts themselves are not that short. He just pulls them up. So
oh,
I think though that gives us a visual of a shorter short than we would otherwise have if they were actually making him short shorts, if that makes sense. I've thoroughly analyzed
yeah,
this,
we're getting
this
deep into the weeds there.
exactly.
I want to give props to somebody that we haven't mentioned much. He had a huge win last night. I don't know how I feel about him being the old guard now, but David Goffin beating Alex Zverev in Shanghai, and Goffin saying he's been inspired by some of the other 30 somethings. That's not a quote that I particularly like, but in all seriousness, I appreciate him for working his way back up and getting to one of these moments, beating the number 2 player in the world.
The perseverance, persistence, the just sort of the big picture perspective you have to claw your way back from injury the way that David Goffin has done. I think it's something that few players have the chance to do. Often once you're off the tour for a certain amount of time or you're not playing at that highest level, you never get that shot again. So persistence pays, and we have a living, breathing example. He
It
still
was
looks
remarkable.
really young though.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, he does look super young. And I know Alcaraz, I misspoke there. He passed Zverev for number 2. Zverev was the 2 seed in this tournament, but still doesn't take anything away from that win for Goffin. Finally, we had a little bit of a sister act there. We had the Andreeva sisters going with Erica winning comfortably over Mira, but we're back to having some sisters and having some sibling rivalry on tour.
I love it. It's funny. I was looking at that result and I was wondering what it would be like if my two girls who play tennis at this stage, if they at one point faced each other in a tournament, I wouldn't like it. Shout out to the Andreeva parents who are having to watch that because I don't think that would be fun. And obviously we saw, when Venus and Serena played the times that they did,
Mhm.
it didn't look like fun for
No,
Richard and Oracene, that's for sure. So shout
it's
out to the
anxiety.
parents who
Yeah,
are dying as that's happening.
there's got to be some anxiety there, and thankfully, it's not a full-on combat sport, which is lovely. But when it's not a team sport, when you're literally one-on-one, it's got to be tough for the parents. Well,
Yeah.
on the negative front, or I should say, interesting front, there is, I should say, a tense relationship going on between umpires and players right now. So we've got some serve clock issues. Tiafoe had an unfortunate incident. He did apologize, which was good to see. Zverev as well as Tsitsipas last night. So that's several male players that are having issues with the officiating and particularly the serve clock. So Blair, if you had any thoughts on this or kind of where this might be headed, good or bad.
Well, first of all, Mitch, I dressed like I was ready to rob a bank today in honor of all the
Yeah.
players who thought that they were being robbed of various things over the
That's
past
good.
week. I have to give a shout out to Ben Rothenberg, who has a new Substack and titled his most recent installment Road Rage Season,
Mm,
because that is what it feels like. This stretch of the year, the gas tanks are low, the tolerance levels are low, everybody's fatigued, and you're sort of limping to the finish line. And I feel like, again, no excuse for some of these reactions. And I'm glad,
mhm,
Frances had a really appropriate apology for what we saw on the court. That,
mhm,
some of these things are inexcusable, but everybody is just low in terms of tolerance level. But
mhm.
while we're on this topic, I do just want to give a shout out to the officials, because that looks like the most miserable job to me. And we have to have officials. And again, I'm sure that they love what they do. That's not to say that they don't love what they're
Yeah.
doing. It's just for someone like me to be the equivalent of sort of a baseball catcher, where you don't really think about them until something goes either fantastically well, they make an
Mhm,
incredible play, maybe they overrule a call and they're
mhm.
correct by 2 millimeters, which happens far
Right.
less often now because we have
Mhm,
electronic line calling in most places. Or that they're there when something goes horribly wrong. I mean, I realize this is their job and they are getting paid, but they're not getting paid millions. You would have
no.
to pay me millions to put myself in that situation where people around the world could evaluate my job performance. And technically, I do work in an industry where people around the world can evaluate my
In
job,
real time.
but there's a lot more that
Uh,
is in my
uh-huh,
control in what I do than there is for the chair umpires. I just
mm,
don't envy them. And I think
yeah.
most of the time for them, they're in sort of these lose lose situations. I will say the shot clock aspect of things is interesting. I think so. We know that started after Roland Garros, where instead of the chair umpire manually
Yeah,
starting,
it's auto.
excuse me, I said the shot clock, but the serve clock,
Yeah,
instead of the
yeah.
chair umpire manually starting the serve clock, it automatically starts, I believe, 3 seconds after the end of the previous point. And in theory, that maybe takes some of the heat off of the chair umpires, because when it was up to the chair umpire's discretion, you had players saying, well, if I were Rafael Nadal, you wouldn't have started the serve clock that early. So
Yeah.
that added a whole other aspect, a whole other way that the chair umpires could be criticized because they're using their discretion. So you take their discretion out of it, but now there's a whole other set of issues. And so it's really hard to figure out what the ideal scenario for that is going forward,
Right.
because it just depends on the players. And now the players can get towels again. There are
Mhm.
so many factors here, but it just, to me, what we're seeing on court right now, whether or not players are actually robbed or they're just
Uh,
perceiving being robbed, whether it be on a double bounce or
mhm,
in Grand Slam finals, as one player said over the
mhm.
course of
Or
the
or
past
they're
couple.
or yeah, or they're using every excuse in the book, like, "What about the other guy? He's way worse than me," or, I mean, and I get it. Look, it's a passionate sport. Players are gonna be passionate. It's their livelihood. They're gonna do things in the heat of the moment like we all would that we would regret. You apologize, you pay the fine that
Yeah.
I'm assuming players are going to get as a result of some of this stuff.
Forthcoming. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I get it. And the umpires have a tough job. They make mistakes as well. The serve clock issue, you highlight something that I think is important, because I think going forward, there's going to have to maybe be adjustments to it in terms of if it's rally length, like our friend Mark Pecci says, if it's a shorter rally, maybe it's shorter. The serve toss, the phantom toss like
Mhm.
Tiafoe did, or just in general, can you just catch your toss to buy yourself some time? These are
Yep.
important questions. And I know it's not fair to the umpires in the actual matches, but structurally at the top of the sport, there's going to have to be some important decisions made about how we adjust the rules, because clearly there's an inefficiency here.
I also don't envy those decision makers
No,
either. Thank
no,
goodness nobody's asking me to fix it, because
no.
it just, with every potential fix, it also opens up, the tennis establishment to
Mhm.
other types of criticism. It's
Yeah.
a tough one on multiple fronts.
Maybe a TikTok of each player's reaction to the surf call. I don't know. I'm just throwing out. Blair's a very big
I love
TikTok
it.
superstar, as we know. Well, we're going to wind this down. Blair Henley on Tennis Channel Inside In with just a couple quick hitters out the door. First thing, I wanted to get your reaction, just a quick recap of how the Hall of Fame ceremony went this year for you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for asking. It is one of my favorite days of the year. Forget just tennis. It is such a special thing to be present for, and I get to do some of the events surrounding the induction. So, there's a brunch that I get to be a part of, and just seeing how special it is for players. Some know the significance of a Hall of Fame. Some European players have no idea how special the International Tennis Hall of Fame is until they walk through the front doors and they see the little horseshoe court and they walk through the museum, which, shout out to the Hall of Fame. They are going to have a new and improved version of the museum coming soon, which I cannot wait to see. But Vijay Armitage, Richard Evans, and Leander Paes getting to be inducted in a new surrounding. This was, I think, the first time since I've been there that they actually had the induction ceremony in the Horseshoe Court, which is this little courtyard area right outside the museum. Beautifully lit. It was packed. And seeing how special it is for this year, guys, those men who are
Mhm.
inducted. But the insider perspective is there is an after party to the induction, and I normally don't go to that just because it's been a long week of hosting the Hall of Fame Open, and I'm usually trying to get some sleep at that point. This year I stayed, and I am so glad I did, because the Hall of Famers, the newly minted Hall of Famers,
Yeah.
also stuck around. And you have not lived until you have seen Vijay Armitage in the middle of a group of people dancing. He's got moves.
Ooh.
They at one point were singing and sort of swaying to Hall of Fame by the script. So late in the night, as things are winding down, the DJ plays Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And to see these three new Hall of Famers arms around one another, just sort of swaying to, living in the Hall of Fame. It's so great. A really
Yeah.
cool moment, not only to witness it, but to see what it means to them firsthand. And we've got some big years of Hall of Fame
Mm.
inductions coming up. So get ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Can't wait to see who gets inducted first and what happens in the future. Yeah. VJ, I mean, he was in a Bond movie with Roger Moore, so I would expect, him to have some style there, but it was
He
a
sure
tremendous
was.
honor.
Shout out to Prakash, also
Mhm.
Tennis Channel's own, because he
Yep.
gave a really great speech welcoming his dad
Yeah.
into the Hall of Fame. That was a highlight for sure.
All right, Blair, last thing. I want to know what your instant reaction was when you saw the Six Kings trailer.
How much money? How do I get to take part in a trailer like this? I just am thinking, this is what we could do if we had money growing on trees. This is what we could do.
I was like, I didn't know Rafa likes the Fantastic Four. I'm like, Holger on a pirate ship of Danish pirates was probably the most like perfect to me. I couldn't believe how meta it got with like Medvedev on a bear and Djokovic like with the wolves out there.
The entire thing, like, put me in the writer's room. I want to be a fly on the wall for the
I
next
know.
one, because I just would have loved to have heard and been present for the creative process. But again, to have the resources to actually do it and to do something that
Unbelievable.
nobody had seen before. I mean, it was a step up from Delray Beach Open Mario Kart, that's for sure. I hate to say it as, as one of my crowning achievements in tennis content. It was a step up for sure.
Blair Henley, always a pleasure. These catch-ups are fun, insightful, and we learn a thing or two about your private investigating skills. But all the best. We appreciate what you do for the sport, and I appreciate you for coming on the show. So until next time, Blair Henley, thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thanks, Mitch.